Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com. Today, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about wheel spacers. Now, before you dive in and just throw a set on your side-by-side or your ATV, there's a few things you may want to consider before you do so. Now, there's all kind of advantages, having a wider track, a little bit more stability, but there's a price to pay when you start messing around with the geometry that they set up from the factory. So if you're ready, we'll dive into this. So you've decided you want to modify your machine just a little bit. You just want it a little bit wider to where you've got a little bit more stability and control when you're out on the track or trail. Okay, a simple way to do that is just to go with a wheel spacer. Pushes out the entire wheel and rim a little bit further than it's stock, and that'll accomplish what you want. But there's a trade-off there. By doing that, you're changing the geometry, not so much in a turning aspect, but in a momentum aspect, either when you're accelerating or when you're braking, one of those two. All right, guys, so which forces are we talking about here? Now, if you take our YZ1000R and you draw a line directly through the center of the tire, hopefully that aligns with the wheel center, the wheel bearing center, bring that straight through. Now, take another line from the top pivot point of your suspension to the bottom pivot point, and this is actually called the kingpin axis. Bring that straight down until it interacts with the outside of the tire. Now, that first measurement at the wheel center is called a kingpin offset. Now, the one that we're really concerned with is the scrub radius, which is down at the bottom. That is the distance in between that center line and where the scrub radius intersects with the ground itself, or the outside of the tire in this case. Now, in most of your double wishbone suspension, that's usually going to be a positive number. The only time you could have a negative is if you had a really large diameter tire, or you're talking about a McPherson strut setup. And for the most part, that's just going to be in the automotive world. Now, the offset and scrub radius, they're really important when you look at moments of inertia, when you're talking about braking or acceleration. And this actually creates a torque that tries to steer the machine one direction or another. Now, most of your positive applications, it's going to be a toe out. So in other words, your left tire is going to pull left and your right tire is going to pull right. Now, do you feel that when you're accelerating or you're braking your machine? Probably not, because what's happening on your right side is counteracted by what's happening on your left. So it may be straining, but you don't feel it in the steering because it's going to be braking evenly. Now, how can you tell that that's really there? Have you ever had one wheel where you had it on the road or some type of good surface and the other side was on ice? What happens? She pulls. That's the force I'm talking about. Now, every machine's going to have a little bit of that. I mean, I can't think of one that has a completely zero, scrub radius. That just doesn't happen. But what happens is when you add in a spacer, it's changing that dynamic a lot. And you may not be able to feel it, but I guarantee you your machine does. And when it does that, it's putting an extra strain not only on the suspension components because you're further out, but also on the bearing itself. Now, when you look at our YZ1000R, it has a moderate scrub radius distance. You add in a spacer and look how that dramatically changes. That is going to increase the amount of wear on your bearings as well as your suspension and your controls. And it's also, believe it or not, going to change your spring rate because your tire is effectively further out and it has a more extreme leverage on the springs of your suspension. So all of these different aspects you need to take into account before you just throw on a set of spacers and head out on the track or trail. Now, looking at one that has a ridiculous amount of spacing, that will put a tremendous strain on everything that we just talked about, and it makes it visually easier to see at this point when you exaggerate it this far. Now, I realize that not many people are going to actually space theirs out this far, but although I have seen it. It's not uncommon for different kits to be either a 1 inch, a 1.5, or even a 3-inch chunk of aluminum that they have you bolt to the front of the machine. I would not recommend, nor would I put a 3-inch spacer on the front of any of my machines. Now, if you're absolutely convinced that you need a wider track for your machine, I would recommend that you go with extended control arms as well as the associated drive shafts. That is going to keep your geometry the same and the machine performing as it should. Now, the one caveat for that is you will have to change your spring rate. It's because you're still pushing out everything further. So it's got more leverage against the springs. So take that into account if you're going to go that route. Now, let's swing back to the spacers themselves. Is there anything substantially wrong with just doing a moderate spacer on a side-by-side? No, I don't think that there is. Just keep it under control. Keep it to 1.5 inches or less. That way you won't run into really severe complications. One other note, not on every machine, but on a lot of your higher speed machines, you not only are centering your wheel on the lug nuts itself, but it's also going to have a centering ring in the middle. And if you put on a set of spacers that does not project out that centering ring, you're going to run the risk of it being out of balance. Now, I know that isn't a big deal for most side-by-sides, because let's face it, you're not running at 100 plus miles an hour on a highway or anything like that. Probably not. So you're not going to feel that effect. But I know from my track car experience using spacers, even just 10 millimeters, if that centering ring isn't dead on, you're going to get all kind of vibrations coming through the steering wheel. But hey, that's a different subject, different platform entirely, but something to take into account if your machine is high speed enough where the manufacturer thought it was important enough to have a centering ring on the very center part of the rim that they're running from the factory. So just something to keep in mind. All right, guys, listen, I didn't come here to talk you out of putting a set of spacers on your machine. I just wanted to enlighten you a little bit about the different forces that are going to be in play if you do make this modification. Well, if you need these or any other parts for your machine, why don't you come see us at Partzilla.com and we can get you taken care of. Have any questions or comments about this video? Leave them in the section below and I'll do my best to answer them. And hey, if you like what you see, why don't you go ahead and hit that notification bell as well as that subscribe button. That way you can keep up with whatever I'm working on next. Well, we just want to say thank you for shopping here with us at Partzilla, and we will see you in the next video. Y'all have a great day.